Good morning, Nakul. Good morning, all. Good morning, Nakul. Good morning, all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Audible. Good morning.
What about the attendance in previous session?
क्या सर अटेंडेंस?
थर्ड सेशन में क्या था अटेंडेंस?
सर वो तो मैं सर रोज डेली सर मैं अपडेट नहीं करता वो।
देवांगी,
यस सर।
अभी जस्ट इस सेशन के पहले वाले में कितने लोग थे? एक अप्रोक्सीमेटली
12 to 15।
अच्छा, ठीक है। आप लोगों का क्या प्रिपरेशन है केस का? कल प्रॉमिस किया था ना कि आज करेंगे। चार ही तो लोग बेटा, इसमें भी चुप रहोगे तो कैसे काम बनेगा? देवांगी, प्रगति, नकुल एंड हार्दिका। My question was, what about your preparation for today's session, that is the Stuxnet and cyber war case? Are you prepared or not? We are four only. अच्छा, आज की क्लास में चार लोग चुप रहे तो पता चलता है कि भाई हाँ चलो, कौन चुप है नहीं मालूम चल रहा है। यहाँ तो चारों बैठे हुए हैं, देवांगी, प्रगति, नकुल, हार्दिका। बोलिए ना बेटा, टाइप करिए वाई और एन। हार्दिका जी कहाँ गए? कहाँ गई? इसमें वो गायब भी हो गई। देखिए भाई, वाई और एन लिखने का भी कौन झंझट ले।
सर
बोलिए बोलिए।
मैं आपको सर असाइनमेंट के बारे में एक क्वेश्चन पूछ सकता हूँ?
100 क्वेश्चन पूछना, बट मेरे क्वेश्चंस का तो आंसर दे दो बेटा। मैं आपके जैसा चुप थोड़ी रहूंगा कि आप पूछोगे तो मैं चुप हो जाऊंगा, आंसर ही नहीं दूंगा या क्लास से क्विट कर जाऊंगा।
सर ये नहीं मालूम सर, आप जो पूछ रहे हो वो सर मेरे को आइडिया नहीं है उनके बारे में।
नहीं वो ठीक है, मैं तो ये कह रहा हूँ कि आपको एक ही क्वेश्चन का, मैंने एक क्वेश्चन पूछा, उसका आंसर आने में तो 3 मिनट लग गए। वो जिसका ऑप्शन ऐसा कुछ था ही नहीं कि आपको पता ना हो। सिंपल सा क्वेश्चन था कि नहीं था? तो आपने
यस।
केस पढ़ा है या नहीं पढ़ा? अब इसमें कोई रॉकेट साइंस तो लग नहीं थी कि पढ़ा या नहीं पढ़ा मैं। पूछिए, आप अपने क्वेश्चन पूछिए, मैं उसी को आंसर करूं।
सर मॉड्यूल 4 असाइनमेंट में जो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन है ना, व्हाट डिड यू इंटरप्रेट फ्रॉम द टर्म नेटवर्क, डिस्कस एनी थ्री टाइप्स ऑफ नेटवर्क कवरिंग देयर बेनिफिट्स।
हम्म
तो सर उसमें एक क्वेश्चन मिला है 306। सर
फर्स्ट रेफर
वो
टू बुक एज वेल, ये मैं पहले आपको बोलूंगा। बुक ऑलरेडी आपके पास है, बुक को भी
यस
रेफर करिए, नोट्स को रेफर करिए, ठीक है।
सर एमा थ्री टाइप्स लिखा हुआ है, आपने जो था एमा सर आपने जो थ्री टाइप्स लिखा हुआ है सर, उसमें
हम्म
से सर लोकल एरिया नेटवर्क्स और मेट्रोपॉलिटन एरिया नेटवर्क्स एंड वाइड एरिया नेटवर्क्स, वो थ्री लिखना पड़ेगा ना?
जो भी लिखना हो आपको, हमने कई पढ़े, उसमें से हमने 3 पूछे।
यस यस। ओके सर, उसमें सर एडवांटेज और डिसएडवांटेज पे लिखना पड़ेगा ना, और लेन
बेटा
में।
क्वेश्चन जो है ये अपने एंड सेमेस्टर एग्जाम की सिंबॉलिक प्रिपरेशन के हैं। मैं इस पर्पज से देता हूँ, अगर मैंने वहां नेटवर्क का क्वेश्चन है तो नेटवर्क से रिलेटेड सारी चीजें आप पढ़ेंगे। मैंने 3 पूछा है तो आप पढ़ेंगे पांचों, 3 आप असाइनमेंट में लिखेंगे, ताकि आपका तो प्रिपरेशन पूरा हो ना बेटा।
यस सर यस।
ये कोई ऐसा तो है नहीं कि मेरे लिए कोई लंच डिनर है कि नहीं यार पूरा लिख दो नहीं तो भूखा रह जाऊंगा। ये
नहीं
तो
नहीं।
आपका प्रिपरेशन है, ये आपका प्रिपरेशन है किस चीज के लिए, एंड सेमेस्टर के लिए। ये मैंने पहले भी कहा था कि इफ यू आर पार्टिसिपेटिंग इन असाइनमेंट्स और इंटरनल मार्किंग, I will assure you they will improve your marks in end semester examination.
ओके सर,
अब
ओके, नो प्रॉब्लम।
अगर आप असाइनमेंट्स को परफेक्टली करते हैं विदाउट चीटिंग, तो आपके 80% एंड अबव चांसेस तो वहीं बन जाते हैं कि आपको कोई दिक्कत नहीं होने वाली है इस सब्जेक्ट को क्लियर करने में। और ये आपकी 50 to 60% परफॉर्मेंस को इम्प्रूव करेंगे एंड सेमेस्टर एग्जाम के। तो मेरे बिजी बंधु, ये बताओ, बहुत बिजी रहे ना, अभी इसमें फॉरेनर तो कोई नहीं है ना, हाँ नहीं है, कि पढ़ क्यों नहीं पाए? क्योंकि 72 आवर्स हो गए मुझे अपलोड किए हुए केस को, और 50 सेशन पहले मैंने बोला ही था कि हर मॉड्यूल के एंड में हम केस करेंगे। फोर्थ में हम नहीं किए क्योंकि वहाँ सच ऐसा रिक्वायरमेंट था नहीं, है ना। तो 72 घंटे में हम 10 मिनट का वीडियो भी नहीं देख पाए, ऐसा है क्या? यस, एनीबडी? Okay, in last session I have shown you the video as well. Do you remember it? So I don't think so we need to waste our time in repeating the video. Still I will ask to you, do you people require to watch both the videos which I already shared, uploaded 2 times, even I have played during the session? Still you people need it, or we need to throw it directly to the case? Yes. म्यूट करके बोलेंगे कोई? अरे हाँ या ना तो बोल दो बेटा। दिवांगी, दिवांगी जी,
Yes, sir.
मैं कोई बड़ा टफ क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा हूँ बेटा जिसमें हमने मौन व्रत रख लिया?
नहीं सर।
कितनी सिंपल सी बात कही मैंने आपके बेनिफिट के लिए, आपके अपने लेवल के लिए, कि बेटा हम इन 2 वीडियोस को 2 बार प्ले ऑलरेडी कर चुके हैं। क्या अभी आपको लग रहा है कि हमको प्ले करना है? अगर करना
नहीं
है तो
सर।
हाँ बोल देंगे कि हाँ सर मैं शायद देख नहीं पाई थी, तो अगर प्ले करें तो ठीक रहेगा केस एनालिसिस में। नहीं सर मैंने ऑलरेडी देखे हुए हैं तो आई एम प्रिपेयर्ड। कितना टफ काम है? कोई बड़ा टफ काम है क्या?
नहीं सर।
तो ये चीज बोलने में मेरे को आप लोगों के नाम का चैंटिंग जैसा करना पड़ेगा यार 5 मिनट तक, तब आप बोलेंगे इस चीज को। बताओ, ये चीज मैं बेटा फर्स्ट सेशन से समझा रहा हूँ, हम 49वें सेशन में हैं तब भी यही सिचुएशन। एक भी नहीं बोला, इतना बोलने के बाद भी नकुल भी चुप है। ब्रजेश जी,
यस
ब्रजेश।
सर।
हाँ बेटा, कितना सिंपल क्वेश्चन था। क्वेश्चन टफ है क्या?
नो।
अनरिपीट रखो। तो फिर बताइए ना, आपको इतना आंसर करने में कि हाँ सर आप वीडियो प्ले कर दीजिए तो ठीक रहेगा, या नहीं सर हमने वीडियो देखे हुए हैं, आप हम डायरेक्ट केस डिस्कस करते हैं। कुछ भी लिख देते, वाई और एन लिख देते, प्लीज प्ले, नो नीड टू प्ले, कुछ भी लिखते। तो इतना लिखना कोई, तो लिखिए भी मत, अनम्यूट करके बोल दीजिए, कोई दिक्कत है क्या?
नो।
नहीं तो 5 मिनट तो मेरे इसी में निकल गया बेटा। अब नकुल बोल रहे हैं, 7 मिनट के बाद उनको याद आ रहा है। थोड़ा सा रिस्पॉन्स टाइम बढ़ा लो बेटा, आगे आने वाले लाइफ में आप लोग भी घर परिवार होगा, जॉब करेंगे, बहुत सारी चीज़ें होंगी, वहाँ पे आप भी कई लोगों से क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे। अगर ऐसे आपको दिन दिन भर में कोई आंसर देगा ना, तो आप इमेजिन करिए आप क्या करेंगे।
On November 24th, 2014, it was the Monday before Thanksgiving. Amy Pascal is driving to her Sony Pictures Studio office in Culver City, California. It's a day just like any other day for the Sony studio chief until she turns on her computer. And there on the screen is an image of a creepy red skeleton with a message, hacked by #GOP. Now, at first, Amy Pascal thinks this has got to be some kind of joke, but it wasn't a joke. It was the beginning of a cyber nightmare so bizarre that not even Hollywood screenwriters could have imagined it. Now, we know that the cyber attack was eventually attributed to the government of North Korea. It was one of the most damaging cyber attacks in American history, and it was perpetrated by one of the most isolated and poorest countries on earth. The attackers stole and then publicly released terabytes of data from Sony, including vital trade secrets, yet to be released movie scripts, salary and contract information, and personal information from thousands of Sony employees. But the attackers didn't just steal, they destroyed. They wiped data from hard drives of thousands of Sony computers and servers. The attack forced Sony off the grid entirely, and the attack revealed private emails so embarrassing that Amy Pascal, one of Hollywood's most powerful executives, eventually had to resign. And then it got worse. The attackers darkly warned of 9/11, and they vaguely threatened violence in movie theaters if Sony went ahead with its planned release of the movie The Interview, the comedy depicting the assassination of North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un. President Obama got involved. The FBI began to investigate. And in the end, the Sony hack wasn't just about Sony anymore. It was a national security incident, an international crisis, and a sneak preview at the future of cyber warfare. Now, just how serious are cyber threats to our nation as a whole, to our nation's economic vitality, to our national security? And how do leaders think about cyber threats in the context of other national security dangers that we confront in the United States? That's the story that I want to tell today. And the story starts by taking a look at the broader threat landscape that US foreign policy leaders have been confronting for the past several decades. This is a picture of the threat environment during the Cold War. It's a picture of a medium-range Soviet ballistic missile, an SS-4, as it's being paraded through Red Square in Moscow. This particular photograph is a Central Intelligence Agency reference photograph that was used during the Cold War. During the Cold War, foreign policy leaders knew that they faced the grave prospect of nuclear Armageddon, but they also knew that they faced a single principal adversary. They knew who that adversary was. They knew where that adversary was, and they had a pretty good idea of the Soviet Union's intentions and its capabilities. After all, the Soviets are parading their nuclear weapons through Red Square, and they're operating at the bureaucratic speed of 5-year plans. This is a picture of the threat environment today. It's more crowded and more uncertain and more complicated than any time in modern American history. It's filled with rising states, declining states, weak states, failed states, rogue states, non-state actors ranging from ISIS to anonymous, and transnational threats like global climate change. And the threat environment isn't just more crowded or complicated today, it's changing faster than ever before too. Every year, the Director of National Intelligence issues a public threat assessment where he runs down the list of dangers confronting the country. In 2007, not that long ago, that threat assessment did not put one word in it about cyber, not one. As late as 2009, cyber threats were so far down the list, they were right near the bottom, just after drug trafficking in West Africa. Not anymore. Cyber threats in the past few years have vaulted to the top of the threat list. And today, many experts and government officials are worried about 3 classes of cyber attacks or threats to our country. The first is the massive theft of intellectual property from American corporations that could degrade our economic competitiveness for generations. The second is attacks that could inflict massive disruption on our way of life in ways that we have never imagined before. And the third is cyber attacks that could degrade, disable, or destroy our nation's military ability to defend itself or to attack if our vital interests are threatened. The threat environment today is crowded, it's complicated, and it's uncertain, and it's changing at the speed of cyber. Cyber threats are a part of this threat environment, and they're new, but they're also very different from other traditional national security threats. And they're different in 5 key ways that I want to talk about with all of you. The first key difference between traditional national security threats and cyber threats is that the United States is simultaneously the most powerful country in cyberspace and the most vulnerable country in cyberspace. And that's different. In the military, we often talk about domains. The military talks about the air domain, the land domain, the sea domain. And in those physical domains, the countries that have the most weapons and the most sophisticated weapons are the most powerful. But that's not true in cyber. The United States has the most sophisticated offensive cyber capabilities of any nation in the world, and yet we in the United States are the most vulnerable. Why? Because we're the most connected. We rely on networks and connectivity for our economy, for our civil society, for our government, for our military, in tremendous and wide-ranging ways. Our connectivity is the source of our strength and the source of our weakness. The second major difference between traditional national security threats and cyber threats is that in cyberspace, the US government cannot go it alone, and this too is new. In every other security realm, the government is considered the legitimate monopoly provider of security. Now, what do I mean by that? If you think about how you want safe streets in your neighborhood, you pick up the phone, you call the police. The police, the government, legitimate monopoly provider of security for safe streets in your neighborhood. Well, the same thing is true if you want a safer country. If you want to secure your country from foreign attack, you strengthen your military. legitimate monopoly provider of security. But in cyberspace, it doesn't work that way. Because 85% of our nation's critical infrastructure is not owned by the US government, it's owned and operated by the private sector. Our power system, our telecommunications networks, our financial system, owned and operated by private actors. The government can't defend those sectors from attack by itself. The government can't go it alone. Now, the third key difference between traditional national security threats and cyber threats is that in cyberspace, the attack surface is huge. There are no safe neighborhoods in cyberspace. One senior military official described cyberspace to me this way. He said, imagine that there is a street in cyberspace that runs through the best parts of town and the worst parts of town, all at the same time. And on this street in cyberspace, people are doing the exact same things they're doing in the physical world. They're going shopping, they're going to their bank, they're watching movies, they're visiting friends. But there are also people on this street that are robbing banks, selling drugs, mugging people, committing all sorts of other crimes. Good guys, bad guys, they're all there together. They're all connected. There are no safe neighborhoods in cyberspace. Now, in part, this is because the internet was never designed to create safe neighborhoods in cyberspace. It was designed by a handful of researchers, including some right here at Stanford, to connect each other, a handful of people who knew each other, trusted each other, and wanted to share their work with each other. Only now, there aren't a handful of researchers on the internet. More than 40% of the world is on the internet, and internet traffic is expected to triple in the next 3 years alone. And then there's the growing Internet of Things. We are moving to a world where we are going to have appliances that are so smart, they turn themselves on when power rates are low, and they remind us to buy milk before we run out. We're moving to a world of driverless cars and implantable medical devices that can transmit vital data about our bodies directly to our doctors. The growing Internet of Things is incredible, but it comes with a dark side, and that dark side is called vulnerability. Because anything that is smart is vulnerable. Now, technologists and computer scientists have a rule of thumb. And that rule of thumb is that when it comes to code, there is one defect for roughly every 2,500 lines of code. One defect for roughly every 2,500 lines of code. Think of it as a chain link fence, where every 2,500 links in that fence, there's a weak link or a missing link, right? One defect for every 2,500 lines of code. And think about the cyber bad guys that are out there. They're like the velociraptors in the movie Jurassic Park. Anyone remember them? Always trying to get out of the fence. So the cyber bad guys are out there, and they're spending every minute of every day testing the fence, penetrating the fence, looking for that one in every 2,500 links that might be weak or missing so they can get through. Okay. Now consider this. If you have an Android phone, that phone has 12 million lines of code making it do all those great things. That's nearly 5,000 inherent vulnerabilities in the code. Not malicious vulnerabilities, just mistakes or oversights or weaknesses that are inherent in the code that the coder never thought about. If you have a Windows operating system on your computer, that's 40 million lines of code. The attack surface in cyberspace is huge. That leads to the fourth difference, which is that in cyberspace, victims often don't even know that they're victims until sometimes long after the fact. The Home Depot breach that made headlines in 2014 wasn't discovered until 5 months after it began. One study found that 85% of cyber breaches were discovered weeks after they occurred, and more than 90% of them were discovered by third parties, not the victims themselves. The military is not immune from this challenge either. The worst publicly revealed breach in US military history occurred in 2008, when an infected thumb drive was placed inside a device inside a US military installation in the Middle East. A foreign intelligence service had put on that infected thumb drive something called a worm. And that worm spread malicious code from computer to computer and eventually accessed classified and unclassified networks. And that malicious code also directly sent that information directly to a server under foreign government control. And all of this was going on for 14 months before it was detected by the Pentagon. 14 months. This was a wake-up call for the Department of Defense. Victims often don't know they're victims until long after the fact. And that leads to the fifth and final difference between traditional national security threats and cyber threats. And that difference has to do with warning time before an attack and response time after an attack. Now, throughout history and warfare, there's usually been a long lead time for potential warning before an attack occurs. And this is because moving people and equipment across territory takes time. It takes effort. And that means there are often telltale signs that an adversary might be up to no good, like massing troops along the border. Once an attack occurs, however, response can be swift because in the physical world, of course, we usually know who attacked us and we know where they are. So long warning time before an attack, short response time after an attack. In cyber, it's flipped. No warning time before an attack, but response is hard, and sometimes it takes a long time. Why? Because of attribution. Attribution, or figuring out who's actually responsible for a cyber attack, is sometimes fast, but usually it's not. Because even if you know the computer or the server where the attack originated, figuring out who's typing behind that keyboard, what's their relationship to a company or an organization or a foreign government is much, much harder. So these timing differences have pretty significant implications for how we think about defense and deterrence in a cyber age. And we're just beginning to figure that out. Now, how does the real cyber movie end? I don't know. But the Nobel laureate Tom Schelling once warned we should be very careful about confusing the unfamiliar with the improbable. The Sony attack was bizarre, but for most of us, it wasn't particularly scary. For most of us, we think about cyber threats of today like this. The cyber threats of today are about our information. It's about people who steal our credit cards. It's about making access to our computers and our smartphones harder. It's about remembering how to remember those passwords now. The cyber threats of today are annoying. They're not alarming. But the cyber threats of tomorrow won't just make our information unsafe. They could make our physical world unsafe too. The cyber threats of tomorrow could disable the cars that we drive, the airplanes that we fly. They could turn off power or water to cities across the country for days or weeks or longer. They could incapacitate our military or even turn our own weapons against us. The cyber threats of tomorrow could affect anything that requires a networked computer to operate. And increasingly, that means everything. Thank you very much.
What I request, you just watch, right now you have just watched it. Watch it in your leisure time, free time, and prepare your own notes, what exactly she is saying. That will be helpful for module, even for your own personal understanding, and whenever you expose yourself in digital world, you will have a proper precautions. Now have a look for the next video.
2 years ago, a computer virus called Stuxnet infected and damaged the Iranian nuclear program. And that may sound like a good thing, but we are now learning this type of cyber attack could also be used against us. Last night on 60 Minutes, correspondent Steve Croft reported on this new cyber warfare battle.
Few people know more about the dark military art of cyber war than retired General Michael Hayden. He's a former head of the National Security Agency and was CIA director under George W. Bush. He knows a lot more about the attack on Iran than he can say here.
This was a good idea, all right? But I also admit this was a really big idea too. The rest of the world is looking at this and saying, clearly someone has legitimated this kind of activity as acceptable international conduct. The whole world is watching.
The story of what we know about the Stuxnet virus begins in June of 2010, when it was first detected and isolated by a tiny company in Belarus after one of its clients in Iran complained about a software glitch. Within a month, a copy of the computer bug was being analyzed within a tight-knit community of computer security experts, and it immediately grabbed the attention of Liam Omerku, an operations manager for Symantec, one of the largest antivirus companies in the world.
As soon as we saw it, we knew it was something completely different.
Steve Croft joins us now. Welcome.
Charlie, good to be here.
Good report. Can you summarize in a simple way how they were able to do this and have that impact on those centrifuges in Iran?
Well, somebody created a virus that was designed to hit one specific target in the entire world, something that had a bunch of a certain configuration of equipment that the computer or the virus was able to determine if it was the right target. This is what it was looking for.
Yeah.
It's one of the most ubiquitous pieces of machinery in the world. It's called a programmable logic computer, and it's just a piece of plastic with some chips in it, and it controls factory floors all over the world. This will tell you what chemicals and what amounts to put into a product that you're making. It'll tell you when to heat up the plant or cool it down. Could be used, for example, to shut off a cooling system at a nuclear reactor. And it was really the first virus to attack this little piece of equipment. And it was after a certain kind of Siemens equipment.
And by doing that, they were able to affect the centrifuges in Iran at a particular place.
Right. What it did was it essentially, the virus this sits in between the operators of the plant and the machinery on the floor. And what the virus was able to do was able to get in here, rewrite the software, and tell the machines to do something entirely different without the operators of the plant knowing it.
You spoke in your piece, for people who didn't see it, with retired General Mike Hayden, who of course is also former head of the NSA and the CIA director. There's a little bit more of your interview we didn't see last time. We want to play right now.
Do you think it was an act of war?
I would not call it an act of war. Look, given my own background, Steve, I mean, I've got this whole universe of things between peace and war that are called covert actions. I don't think whoever did this considered it to be an act of war. The Iranians have not quite responded to it as if it were an act of war. It's in that space between the two.
If the United States were involved in this or were to become involved in something like this,
Right.
How high would the authorization have to go?
You're asking a theoretical question.
Right.
I'm going to give you a theoretical answer based upon my experience in government. Something of this nature gets approved in the West Wing.
General Hayden said a lot of things in which he made space between the fact when he was in government making policy and where he is now.
Yeah.
But he knows a lot of stuff.
He knows a lot of stuff, and he knows a lot of stuff that he can't say. And he was president or director of the CIA for George Bush. At a time, this would have been green-lighted.
What do they fear the most?
Well, I think that they fear somebody using something like this against us. And the thing that's really interesting about it is that this virus, as General Hayden said, it's not like a conventional weapon that destroys itself along with the target. It's out there for people to copy. So you can actually go online and find the formula for making this, the code.
It's the footprints that Cesar, I think you referred to it, or someone in the report did last night. It really is a Pandora's box that now has been opened.
Right. And somebody else could turn around and modify it and use it against us if they can find the way into our computer system.
Go ahead.
I was just, is there any indication that that's being done, or that anything specifically being built on Stuxnet right now?
Well, there's now another virus sort of moving around the world called Dooku that a lot of people think was built by the same people, or or have used the code of Stuxnet. There's also targeting PLCs. It seems right now to be extracting information from the PLCs so that it could be used in another Stuxnet type attack. But this is really an historic thing. I mean, it's going to be a component of war from now on. This was an historic event. And it can be used to disrupt all sorts of things.
The conventional wisdom or the perceived wisdom is that this might have been done by the Israelis, but they could not have done it without U.S. help.
I don't think so. I think that everybody feels that it was mostly a U.S. operation, everybody that we have talked to.
A U.S. operation.
U.S. operation, but obviously there was a lot of intelligence that was picked up on the ground. Somebody knew how this plan operated. And certainly, I think the Israelis have proved that they have a bunch of people on the ground there.
Indeed. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, so quickly we will move towards the question answer. If you have watched it properly with full attention, then I hope you will be in a position to answer certain questions, because it's purely based on your observation, nothing else. First question is, what are the three classes of cyber attack? The first video, as per the first video, and their effect. Three classes. मौन व्रत नहीं रखेंगे, बोल पा रहे हैं तो ठीक है, नहीं बोल पा रहे हैं तो नो लिख के आप रिप्लाई करेंगे. यस ब्रिजेश बोलिए.
The first one was about the massive theft of intellectual property.
या कॉर्ड आया था इसलिए फोन डिस्कनेक्ट हो गया था.
Yes.
यस ब्रिजेश बोलिए बोलिए.
The first one is the massive theft of intellectual property. And the second is the tax that could inflict massive disruption. And the third is nation's military ability to defend itself.
Three things is the intellectual property, your overall information, data, knowledge which you have regarded that will affect your economic competitiveness. Then attack that disrupt the way of life. The example of Venezuela power grid failure, if you can recall, right? That was the case. And third was the case of military ability to defend itself. Your own weapons will start working against you. You can reconnect our thought where we discuss about the movie Robot of Rajnikant and Aishwarya Rai. Clear how robots, those who prepared for a good purpose, somebody change their codes and they start for destruction. I hope you can recall those examples. Yeah, next one. 5 key differences. Yes.
Sir.
Yeah.
The one was that in cyber attack the warning is not given. Like
warning, yes, correct.
And in traditional warning are given before attack.
Yeah, you may be well prepared about certain happenings.
Yes.
Good. So 5 things were there. First one is the most powerful and most vulnerable. Physical world. Recall the example of America. She mentioned in the first video that America is more vulnerable because America is more powerful, or you can say more connected. The government cannot go it alone because as per the third point, the attack surface is used. It's not in the only single-handedly you can say they can control. Even it's like in a corona kind of. Corona is a biological form, but the virus, those who are spreading through the digital world, they also have the same impact. It is not going to affect the human. It will affect to the devices the human are using, or the other things which we are using. All right. Then victims often don't know they are victims until unless something is not happening recognizable. You will not be aware. In the video, as he mentioned that 14 months later, Pentagon realized they are having cyber attack in their systems. 14 महीने बाद उन्हें पता चला कि उनके सिस्टम पर साइबर अटैक हुआ है 14 month, जस्ट इमेजिन। क्लियर? 14 महीने बाद उन्हें पता चल रहा है कि ऐसा हुआ है।
Yes, sir.
In warning and decisions, as you said, for example, the Pulwama attack and India's effort or retaliations. So Pakistan is well aware that something is going to happen from the Indian side because they dented a very huge, you can say, 44 casualties. But in the form of cyber attacks, nobody knows because it happens in the fraction of seconds. You are very fine, things are very fine, but somebody may attack on your various digital devices. Nobody knows it. Am I right? Now, why is the Stuxnet event considered to be historic? Anyone? They mentioned in the video, one thing you understand, केस में बेटा मजा तब आएगा जब आप बोलेंगे। केस सॉल्यूशन के लिए नहीं होता है, डिस्कशन के लिए होता है। मौन व्रत में केस डिस्कस नहीं होता। आप गलत होंगे, गलत से ज्यादा नहीं हो सकते। कैसे समझाऊं आपको? लेकिन जब तक आप अपने ब्रेन को ओपन ही नहीं करेंगे, आप नहीं सीख पाएंगे। ये स्विमिंग जैसा है। मैं एज अ टीचर बहुत स्विम करके दिखा दूं कि ऐसे ऐसे करना चाहिए, लेकिन जब तक आप नहीं कूदेंगे आपको कुछ नहीं पता चलेगा बेटा स्विमिंग होता क्या है। मैं आपको अब भी आंसर भी डिस्प्ले कर दूं, बट आपको उससे कुछ समझ नहीं आएगा, लाइफ में समझ नहीं आएगा कि हम इसको कैसे एक्ट रिएक्ट करें। स्टार्ट करिए बेटा बेटा बोलना। अभी आप इस स्टेज में जहाँ से आप मिस्टेक्स करेंगे, वेलकम है। इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे करेंगे, मोस्ट वेलकम। रिपीट ना करें, दैट्स ओनली द कंसर्न। आप लर्न कर लेंगे कम से कम। यस, व्हाई?
Sir,
Yes.
Because terabytes of data was means leaked of that Sony company. Yeah, and of the thousands of employees and the chairman, I think, Amy Pascal, has to resign after her emails were leaked, and many great personalities, means president and
No,
that all
that's
were
we are
involved.
talking about the Stuxnet, beta, not the Sony.
So, okay, sir.
That was the first attempt by a nation against the nation. Other attacks generally by the hackers, crackers, grey hackers, those people, general public, am I right? But the Stuxnet case was the first recorded. I'm not saying things were not happen earlier, but they were not on the record. That was the first incident was recorded. The one nation use the cyber war against the another nation for their own development. What is the danger that the creator of Stuxnet have created for the industrial countries? Industrial countries. Yes, Rhea. Yes. Yeah. यस बोलिए. कुछ ही लोग रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हैं यहाँ पे क्लास में, बाकी को नहीं आता बोलना. You can recall the example of again the robot movie. So the problem is that the code itself can be copied, changed, or replicated. And that may be launched again the nation. Something has happened. That's a conspiracy that something has happened with the India's China's second China mission, Chandrayaan-2, as well as the Israel's missions. They have used certain equipments from the same nation, certain devices you can say, on both the missions, and they both were failed. Yes. Yes.
Sir,
Yes, please.
the virus works by infecting industrial control device
Yeah.
and logic controllers.
Yeah. So there are units, right? Those who actually work in that particular form. So since, as we learned in module 4, LAN and encryptions, the people try to protect their own network. In that case, when you plant it, you need to have someone who can replace those particular codes. So you require someone who will look after the local need, and accordingly it will plant. It's a negative notation you can say, but it's need to be there, then only it will work. Getting my point?
Yes, sir.
ये लास्ट क्वेश्चन था जो एंकर ने भी पूछा था, because that was not leaded to it, and that guy simply said it's a hostile event but not a all-out war. That's their strategy, you can say, they use to stop. Yes, Nakul, please.
सर 6 क्वेश्चन आप समझ दोगे ना, फिर सर आप फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन रिपीट करना सर, और नहीं मालूम पड़ा फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन।
6 को पहले पढ़ लो ना बेटा, 6 तो सिंपल है. It's a one kind of a strategy to stop some other nation to become a nuclear power country. Am I right? So they strategically use that. They planted in the PLC, programmable logic unit, that have their own programs. You are thinking about it, so working in a, let's say 60 kilometer per hour kind of a speed, but it's exactly working is in 70 kilometer per hour. So for your programming you require 60, but it's unnecessary working on 70, so you will not get the same outcome. समझे ना? तो ये पॉसिबल ही नहीं हुआ, तो कंट्री क्या होगी, न्यूक्लियर पावर कंट्री नहीं बन पाएगा. अमेरिका का यही एक प्लान था कि भाई इसको नहीं बनने देना है. इट्स नॉट ट्रीटेड एज अ एक्ट ऑफ वॉर. फर्स्ट वाले में क्या प्रॉब्लम था भाई? Those who wish to leave, they can leave. Yeah. हाँ बोलिए नकुल, क्या बोल रहे हैं?
सर आप फिर से रिपीट करो फर्स्ट वाला. यस,
ये फर्स्ट ही तो है, सामने तो डिस्प्ले हो रहा है बेटा, बताइए ना. इसमें कुछ है ही नहीं. फर्स्ट वीडियो में डायरेक्टली उसने बोला हुआ है ये सारी चीजें कि मेजर जो एरियाज हैं, क्लासेस हैं, वो 3 टाइप से हैं. इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी के आपको इकोनॉमिक लॉस हैं, जो अभी तो आने वाला है, जब जो हम वर्क कर रहे हैं, क्या बोलते हैं, स्मार्ट सिटीज. स्मार्ट सिटी में तो आपके नल, पानी, लाइट सब कंट्रोल हो जाएगी, और उस पर अगर अटैक हुआ तो लाइट आपके यहाँ, बल्ब आप नहीं जला पाएंगे, कोई दूसरा आपके घर को कंट्रोल कर लेगा. घर के लॉक कोई दूसरा कंट्रोल करेगा, फ्रिज एसी कोई दूसरा कंट्रोल करेगा, वॉशिंग मशीन कोई दूसरा कंट्रोल करेगा. गाड़ी आपकी है बट ड्राइव कोई और कर रहा होगा दूर से बैठा हुआ. इमेजिन भी नहीं कर सकते आपकी सिचुएशन कितनी भयानक होगी. एट द बोथ हैंड, those who are having the good work for society, they are working for it, है ना, वो भी वर्क कर रहे हैं कि ऐसा कुछ ना हो. बट विकेट माइंड भी हैं. राम थे तो रावण भी था, तो वो भी चीजें हैं, बट डेंजरस है, मैं ये कह रहा हूँ.
यस सर.
So now we will have one more session in next week. That will be the last session. Prepare yourself well. For last session, you can ask question from module 1 to module 5. Whatever need you required from my end, whatever preparation guidance you required, everything. That will be the last session. We required only the discussion, problem solving, and the support which you required. For marking, you are solely responsible for internal marks. To participate in the assignment, submit on time. And if you are doing by your own without cheating, I can guarantee you, if you go through the assignments, it will 101% improve your marks in the end semester examination. So one way you can score good marks in internal, as well as it will ensure that you are having good marks in external examination, end semester examination. Okay. Thank you everyone.
Thank you sir. Thank you.